千里之行，始于足下. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we delve deeply into the Daodejing by Lao Tzu. So when we talk about this whole idea of one thing leading to something else, in the Tao tradition, there's a story that illustrates this as well. It takes the form of a folk tale as well as a historical account. It is the final chapter for this, it's the final story for this chapter, and I would like to tell you the folk tale. It's called The Ivory Chopsticks. The Chinese characters that you see right at the top of the slide is exactly what that translates to, that, the ivory chopsticks. Here's the story of the ivory chopsticks. Once upon a time, in ancient China, there was a man living in a small town. He worked hard to make a living. He was diligent. He was reliable in his business dealings. After 20 years of plying his trade, he was finally able to establish his own little store. So his store had a good reputation. His store had a decent amount of business. Therefore, he was able to attain financial stability for himself and his family. He was even able to save up quite a bit of money, more than he ever had before. He had a dream to expand his business, and he was getting close to being able to do that, to make his store the best in town. So overall, things were looking up for him. One day, while he was out traveling on business, he came across a pair of chopsticks. Strangely enough, someone had dropped a pair of chopsticks on the road, out in the middle of nowhere. He picked them up, and he saw that these were no ordinary chopsticks. They were exquisitely crafted from ivory. He had never seen anything like these chopsticks before. He thought, wow, these must have been dropped by accident. Whoever dropped them must be fabulously wealthy. He thought, I've never even heard of anyone who used such rare and precious chopsticks to eat. It's crazy. So, holding the ivory chopsticks, he waited for quite a while, out in the middle of nowhere. But no one came back looking for the chopsticks, so he decided to take them for himself. After all, finders keepers. So when he finally got home, he thought, I have to show these chopsticks to my friends. They would be so amazed and envious. So he set up a table and thought about who among his friends he should invite for dinner. But suddenly he frowned, noticing now the difference between the exquisite ivory chopsticks and his own very basic utensils. The mismatch was glaringly obvious and it bugged him. So he postponed his plans. He thought, well, before I invite my friends over to show off the ivory chopsticks, I need to at least make sure that everything on this table is matching the exquisite quality of the ivory chopsticks. They don't need to be quite as good. They can't be. This is too rare and too amazing, but they should be better than what I have. So he traveled to the nearest city to purchase the finest silverware that could match, that could, not look too bad next to the ivory chopsticks. He found that they were pretty expensive, so he had to dig into his savings, the money that he had set aside for his business. So with the better silverware, he set up the table again. Now the ivory chopsticks no longer looked so out of place. It was simply there among the finely crafted silverware. That was good. But then looking at it, he frowned again. Now he was noticing that the old table and chairs around the table, they looked out of place. So just imagine you've got all of this nice silverware and the chopsticks on top of an old table. It wasn't right. Something wasn't right, and it bugged him. He felt that he had no choice but to buy all new high quality table and chairs. This took another week, and it also required quite a bit of money from his savings. So with the new table set up and the matching chairs all around it looking pretty good, the silverware and ivory chopsticks also look good on top of the new table. But now he could not help but notice that the rest of his furniture, everything other than the table and the new chairs, the rest of his furniture looked old and rustic. Now, of course, they have been that way for years. They haven't changed. It's just that he never noticed before. Now he felt he had no choice but to replace all the furniture. This took weeks. He had no time to manage his store, but instead devoted his time in selecting and buying furniture for all the rooms of his house. And for this, he had to dig deeply into his savings. Finally, he got all the furniture to the point that he felt was satisfactory. Looking at them, he thought, okay, this is a satisfactory level of quality. Now everything kind of match. But now the house itself seemed too plain, too run down. He felt he had no choice but to spend even more money to have workers come in to paint every room, to fix up all the old and creaky doors and windows. This took months. Finally, the interior of the house looked great. All the rooms were freshly painted. All the furniture were brand new. But now it was really obvious that the exterior of the house did not match the interior. Oh no! He felt that he had no choice but to use what remained of his savings for the exterior. He did a complete renovation externally. He did a landscaped, beautiful garden around his house. By now, it had been over a year. His savings were completely depleted. His store had no more business due to the neglect, so he had to shut it down. He never got around to inviting his friends either. All of this starting with the ivory chopsticks. So that is the story of the ivory chopsticks. You can see that it's a different kind of story than the Midas touch. But in terms of life patterns, it certainly has similarities. So let's dig into the story in a little more detail to think about the symbology involved. As is the case with most Tao stories, the chopsticks are symbolic in nature. The chopsticks are not chopsticks. They stand for other things. They can take on the form of many other things in life. What do they represent? Well, they represent the starting point of the slippery slope. Once you get on it, you start to slide because it's slippery. It's not just the one thing, it's the thing that follows the one thing, and it's the next thing that follows the next thing, and then the next, and then the next, and so on. When it comes to material acquisitions, it's just never, okay, just one more. One thing always leads to another, as you have seen in the story of the Ivory Chopsticks. So notice one thing. Throughout this entire story, the underlying current is I've got to show off these ivory chopsticks to my friends. They would be so amazed and envious. The driving force was always the ego, the egocentric thinking about wanting to look good, which is the pursuit of fame. To be known, to attain a degree of fame as the man who owns rare and precious ivory chopsticks. The root cause of problems is ego. And you can also see that this is right in line with what Lao Tzu was saying about not knowing when to stop. When will be the best time to stop? Well, actually at the very beginning. In this particular story, the man never woke up to the reality of his situation, so he never stopped. At every stage, he felt he had no choice but to go on to the next. And this is because as long as the ego desire or craving is present, it will always be a bottomless pit, no exception. The process will end only when your ability to continue has been destroyed. In the case of the horse lover, it's being kicked, killed by the horse. Then the process ends. Or, much less frequently, you awaken to the truth. And what we want to do in studying the Tao is to sharpen, strengthen our ability to awaken to the truth. Now, at the outset, I mentioned that this particular story has a folktale component, which you have just heard, and there's also a historical account that follows the same patterns and that was also based on the same exact symbol. In this case, actual ivory chopsticks. So let me also share that with you. Ivory chopsticks serve a similar role for King Zhou of Shang, Wang. He lived approximately 3,000 years ago, so he predated Lao Tzu by centuries. So what happened to him? Here's what the drawing of him looks like. So you can see there. Now, what happened in this historical account is that he flaunted his ivory chopsticks in his court. He showed all his advisors. One of the advisors, who happened to be his uncle, was very wise. Upon seeing the ivory chopsticks, he saw nothing good. He saw behind it everything leading to ruin for the empire. Now, when he expressed his reservation, oh, that's a sure sign were all doomed. The other advisors disagreed and said, aren't you making something big out of something very little? Those were just, ivory chopsticks. What's that got to do with the destruction of the empire? Well, this wise advisor pointed out the following, and he's got quite a few steps in his reasoning. He said, the ivory chopsticks should not be matched with pottery, but with bowls made of jade. That is escalation number one. Number two, the jade bowls should not contain coarse grains, but the most exotic delicacies. Escalation number two. And then number three, the one used to such delicacies will not want to wear plain clothes or live in huts, but would prefer to wear fine silk and live in towers. It doesn't stop there. It goes on. The wise old advisor said, such a ruler would not want to be confined within the borders of the empire, but would send explorers abroad, outside the empire, to seek rare treasures. This right here is a metaphor by itself, meaning the emperor would find all kinds of distractions other than statecraft, other than the proper running and carrying of the empire. Instead, be engaged in frivolous pursuits, like sending explorers out to seek exotic, rare treasures. Number five, these would all be signs pointing to the decline of the empire, not auspicious at all. Now, the other advisors did not necessarily agree with this. Oh, you're exaggerating. Oh, come on, it's not so bad. Those are the kind of things that we would say, but history proved that the advisor was correct. This particular emperor, Wang, he turned out to be the very last emperor of the Shang dynasty, the Shang dynasty. After that, it broke apart. Another dynasty would then take over. So this is exactly what we're talking about, the danger of not knowing when to stop. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.